They came not as soldiers, but as shadows of the dead. 10 years after the 300 Spartans were wiped out at Thermopylae, an army of 10,000 Spartan warriors marched once again. But this time, they did not come to defend. They came to avenge. Every step they took echoed with a single memory. The narrow pass where Leonidas and his men made their final stand. The Persians thought they had crushed Spartan pride that day. They believed the spirit of Sparta died at Thermopylae. They were wrong because at Plataea, the Spartans didn't just fight for Greece, they fought for revenge. And what happened there would change the future of the ancient world forever. The year was 479 BC. Greece stood at the edge of destruction. The Persian Empire, the mightiest force the world had ever seen, had already burned Athens, slaughtered entire cities, and left Thermopylae soaked in Spartan blood. King Xerxes had returned to Persia, believing Greece was broken, leaving behind one of his most trusted generals with a vast army to finish the conquest. But what Persia did not expect was that Sparta had not forgotten. This was no longer just a war for survival. This was a war born from humiliation, fury, and a promise made by dying warriors at Thermopylae. We will return. And now at Plataea, that promise was about to be fulfilled in fire and iron. The smoke of Thermopylae still haunted Greece. Families whispered the names of the fallen. Leonidas, the 300 Spartans, and the few who stood with them. Their last stand had become legend. But legends alone could not stop an empire. The Persians had marched deeper, burned Athens, and stood proudly across Greek lands as if victory was already theirs. But in the silent corners of Sparta, something was rising. Not fear, not despair, but vengeance. Sparta had mourned its king. Mothers who lost sons did not weep in weakness. They sharpened the spears of their younger children. Fathers who buried warriors did not break. They prepared their surviving sons for war. And in the heart of Sparta, a silent oath spread through its people like fire. Thermopylae will be avenged. Meanwhile, the Persian commander Mardonius, confident and arrogant, remained in Greece with a massive army. He believed that a divided Greece would soon kneel. He sent messages offering peace to the Spartans and Athenians, peace in exchange for surrender and tribute. But his words were met with cold silence. No Spartan would kneel. No Athenian would accept peace over pride. And then Sparta moved. Not in rage, not in chaos, but with deadly calm. 10,000 Spartans, elites hardened by discipline and grief, gathered not for defense, but for retribution. They marched north, their scarlet cloaks fluttering like blood against the wind. At their head stood Pausanias, a Spartan regent carrying the legacy of Leonidas himself. He gave no grand speeches. Sparta did not believe in words, only in action. As the Spartans advanced, something unexpected happened. Greece united. Over 70,000 Greek hoplites from Athens, Corinth, Megara, and more joined the Spartan-led army. Men who once argued over borders now stood shoulder to shoulder, not as city-states, but as one shield wall. The Persians watched them gather at Plataea, a wide plain perfect for open battle. Mardonius smiled. To him, this was exactly what he wanted. A final battle to crush Greek resistance forever. He had cavalry, superior numbers, archers, and foreign troops from all corners of the empire. He believed victory was already written. But he made the same mistake Persia made at Thermopylae. He thought the Greeks were fighting for survival. He was wrong. They were fighting for revenge. As night fell before the battle, the Persian camp echoed with music, torches, and celebration. They feasted, confident the Greeks would break just as before. But across the plain, the Greek camp was silent. No songs, no feasting, just the quiet sound of armor being fastened, shields inspected, spears sharpened. There was no fear left in them, only purpose. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans died to delay the Persian army. At Plataea, 10,000 Spartans marched to end it. Dawn broke over Plataea, and with the first light came movement. The Persian cavalry, fast and confident, swept across the field like a dark tide. Hooves thundered, arrows flew, and dust rose in great clouds. The Greeks held their formation, shields locked, spears forward. The Persians expected them to panic, to scatter so the cavalry could crush them in the open. But the Greeks did not break. Every time the Persians charged, They met an unmovable wall of bronze and discipline. Spartan hoplites stood silent, stepping forward only when ordered, their shields overlapping like scales of an iron beast. The Persians threw wave after wave at them, and each time they were forced back. Still, Mardonius smirked. This was just the beginning. He had numbers. He had cavalry. He had archers who could darken the sky with arrows. All he had to do was keep pressure until the Greek lines thinned. That's when Sparta did something unexpected. They refused to attack. The Persians were ready for a Greek charge, eager for a glorious clash, but the Spartans stood perfectly still. Minutes turned into hours. The sun climbed higher. Persian cavalry kept circling, loosing arrows, taunting the Greeks. Still, no Spartan moved. Confusion rippled through the Persian ranks. Why weren't they attacking? Where was the famous Spartan fury? Why did they just wait? Because Sparta was doing something Persia couldn't understand. They were waiting for discipline to defeat arrogance. As the day grew hotter, Persian cavalry grew tired. Horses needed rest. Archers ran low on arrows. And in that moment of Persian fatigue, Hosanius finally raised his spear. It was the signal. The Spartan line advanced slowly, like a great red tide rolling across the field. No shouting, no chaos, just steady footsteps and iron will. The Persian cavalry rushed to stop them, but now tired and disorganized, they crashed into the Spartan wall and shattered like glass. Then came the moment Persia feared. The Spartan right wing pivoted, targeting not the front lines, but directly toward Mardonius himself. Just like Alexander would do centuries later, the Spartans didn't want to break the army. They wanted to cut off the head. Mardonius realized too late what was happening. He ordered his elite guard forward, but their light armor was no match for Spartan bronze. The clash was brutal. Spartan spears pierced shields and shattered Persian formations. Dust and blood filled the air. Then a single throw changed everything. A Spartan warrior seeing Mardonius giving commands at top, a white horse hurled his spear with all the wrath of Thermopylae behind it. The spear struck. Mardonius fell, and with him, the Persian command collapsed. The moment their commander hit the ground, the Persian lines broke like dry wood under a hammer. Without leadership, their army, once so confident, turned into a storm of panic. What had started as a battle now became a hunt. The instant Mardonius hit the ground, a ripple of fear erupted through the Persian ranks. What had been a vast and confident army only moments before was now cracking. Soldiers looked around, unsure of where to run or who to follow. The sound of Persian war drums was drowned by something far more terrifying: the steady march of Spartan bronze advancing with cold, controlled fury. Unlike other armies that chased victories in wild triumph, the Spartans moved with purpose. Every step forward was a reminder. This was not just a battle, it was an execution of justice. They remembered Thermopylae, they remembered Leonidas, and now the debt was due. The Persian lines crumbled inward, retreating toward their fortified camp. Thousands fled, dropping weapons, pushing each other aside in desperation. Arrows flew wildly, but panic had already taken hold. An army that loses its will loses everything. The Greeks, Spartans, Athenians, and their allies pressed forward, surrounding the Persian encampment. The camp, once a symbol of Persian strength, now stood as a cage of fear, where soldiers trapped themselves in chaos. Some Persian officers tried to rally resistance, shouting commands, swearing that the gods of Persia still favored them. But then the Spartan war horn sounded. It wasn't a sound of celebration, it was a sound of judgment. With a thunderous crash, the Spartans smashed through the Persian barricades. The Persians tried to hold the gates, but Spartan shields crashed against them like a storm against stone. Once inside, the Greeks didn't fight like men seeking glory. They fought like men fulfilling a promise. Persian archers retreated to higher ground, loosing desperate volleys. Greek hoplites raised shields, spears thrusting upward with precision. Inside the camp, the Persians fought in confusion. Their numbers meant nothing against Greek unity and Spartan training. One by one, Persian banners fell. The camp that once fed a mighty army was now covered in smoke, screams, and the thunder of Greek iron. For every fallen Spartan at Thermopylae, Persia now paid in thousands. And then something symbolic happened. Amid the ruins of the Persian camp, the Greeks found Mardonius's tent still standing, filled with gold, luxury, and the spoils of conquest. A stark contrast to the simple Spartan cloak of Leonidas, who died with nothing but a spear in his hand. History had reversed. The Persians, who once believed victory came from wealth and numbers, were now crushed by men who marched with no riches, only memory, wrath, and discipline. As the Greek banners rose above the camp, one truth echoed louder than the clash of swords. At Plataea, Greece did not just win a battle, they ended the Persian dream of conquering the West. The invasion that began in glory ended in ashes. When the smoke cleared over Plataea, the battlefield told a story that would echo for centuries. The mightiest empire of the ancient world, Persia, had been brought to its knees not by numbers, not by gold, but by a force Persia never truly understood. Greek unity and Spartan resolve. The Greeks gathered their dead with honor. The Persians were left scattered, nameless in the mud. Where once the Persian army moved with pride, now only silence remained, broken by the steady march of Spartans reclaiming the battlefield. Not for plunder, but for justice. The war was not just won, it was ended. Persia's dream of conquering Greece died at Plataea. Their king, Xerxes, who had once watched his armies march like waves across continents, now received news of utter defeat. His generals slain, his elite warriors gone, and his empire humiliated by those he once called mere warriors from small cities. Greece, a land once divided by rivalries and pride, had now become a shield of freedom. And leading that shield from Thermopylae to Plataea was the Spartan legacy. But Sparta did not celebrate with festivals or grand monuments. That was not their way. Instead, they sent a simple message carved into stone. Here the Greeks fought the Persians and broke their power. No boasts, no speeches, just fact. For the world, Plataea was more than a battle. It was a warning written in blood and iron. Even the greatest empire can fall when it underestimates those who fight not for conquest, but for home. Persia had been powerful. Persia had been rich. But Sparta had something Persia could never buy. The unbreakable will to stand and say, "This far, no further." From that day, the Persian Empire never again dared to invade Greece. The tides of history had shifted, and the name Sparta became not just a city, but a legend of defiance. And so with Plataea, the Greeks didn't just win a war. They forged a legacy that still lives today in every story of resistance, every stand against overwhelming odds. This was not just a battle of swords, but of spirit. If you want to uncover more hidden battles, forgotten tactics, and the untold truths of ancient warfare, don't stop here. Subscribe because the next story will take you even deeper into the wars that shaped our world.